Hey there guys. Infrastructure is one of the most important determining factors in terms of population growth, in terms of job growth, and in terms of income growth in Australia. And you only have to look at Sydney and Melbourne over the last 20 years and the amazing infrastructure projects that have occurred down there, like the rail systems, like the tram systems, like the ferry systems, you know, like all of the amazing projects that have occurred down there, the hospitals, the schools, the train stations, and everything that has absolutely exploded and gone off its head, to see how much of an effect that can have on property prices. But up here in Queensland, we're at the start of what we call, or we're calling, the great infrastructure boom, and that is the federal government, the state government and the local councils up here really investing in a big way in infrastructure, because they know that 25% of Australia's population growth over the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years is going to come into the southeast corner. So in today's video we're going to share some of the major infrastructure projects occurring in Brisbane right now, and then in other videos we'll also talk about the same thing on the Gold Coast as well as the Sunshine Coast.
So I really like, you know, growing up in Sydney, we got to watch a lot of those infrastructure projects occur over the last 20 years, and moving up to Brisbane, it's always felt like a bit of a sleepy city, but now you can really see, as you're moving through the city and you see all of these new infrastructure projects coming out and coming into fruition, some of the amazing things that are happening. And one of the major ones that has just got passed through the local government is actually the Undercity Railway. So what's this going to be is like a metro tunnel underneath the entire city to make connections throughout the entire CBD and inner ring of Brisbane a lot more accessible for so many people and workers.
Because for those of you that don't understand the way that Brisbane's set up, it is a little bit different than Sydney and Melbourne. There is the big Brisbane River that separates the south and the northern sides of the city, and so at the moment you've got heaps of bridges that run cars across the city, but this metro line is the first time where they're going to dig a huge tunnel underneath the city, and I think there's 6 or 8 new train stations, which are obviously going to have a massive effect on the property prices in those areas where the metro actually ends up popping out. So I think that's a huge project to watch. It's also going to employ a huge amount of skilled and high income people into the city and sort of suck them in for that major project.
And they're also actually adding an over river railway as well, so you can get the connection from the north to the south of the river, which is going to be huge also. And as you said, it's going to draw in those high income earners, the big project managers, the engineers that potentially may be moving from other areas and moving up into the Brisbane area to help them execute on these type of deals.
Another one of the major projects that I really like, particularly with where we are, like looking around today, this is winter in southeast Queensland right now. You know, almost 300 days of the year it's sunny between the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast, so we are blessed by the environment up here. And why I'm excited about this project, which is effectively Brisbane putting in another runway at the international airport there, is we can bring more and more tourists into this southeast Queensland corner now. Obviously with the average income in parts of Asia, China for example, Japan for example, as well as
Singapore,
Taiwan, the Philippines coming out of it, parts of India, you're going to have a huge amount of people that obviously want to come and see Sydney because of its sights, but want to come here for a lifestyle, and that gets me super excited in terms of our capacity to accommodate for more tourists coming here every year as well.
And that's not just the Brisbane airport, there's major upgrades occurring down in the Gold Coast airport and also the Sunshine Coast airport, which would be amazing for tourism in Queensland.
Yeah, so you've got obviously infrastructure going in from a rail perspective, you've got infrastructure from a planes or an airport perspective. The other major piece of infrastructure that I think is fantastic, because I've driven into Sydney and parts of Melbourne from different parts of the city, and particularly Sydney right now is just an absolute shit fight. As everybody knows, coming from the south side, coming from the north side of the city, it is just chaos. Like, I can't even believe it, but some of those roads are still only 2, maybe 3 lanes max wide. On the weekend it feels like you're in peak hour traffic these days.
It's ridiculous. When I was living in Sydney, I was living in the southern beaches and working in the eastern beaches, and the kilometres was only about 25-30 kilometres to get from one to the other, but it used to take me about 2 hours to get to work every single day, and I'm just pulling my hair out. And it's just unbelievable. So these upgrades up here, the major upgrades are on the M1 and the M3, and they're converting those highways at the moment from a 2-lane highway into a 4-lane highway to accommodate for that major population growth that Brisbane is set to occur.
So the M1s and the M3s run into and out of the city on the northern and the southern sides, and why we think this is so important is they're accommodating the growth in the future, rather than Sydney, for example, that has put, you know, beautiful big unit blocks right on the side of the highway there, so the highway can never go wider. In Brisbane, they're opening up, as Simon said, 4-5 lanes into and out of the city to the north and the south, which means that as we move to a city of 5 million people over the next 30 years, which is the size of Sydney and Melbourne now, those people have a better chance of being able to commute in a more meaningful way, which takes a lot of pressure off people and obviously gives them more lifestyle as opposed to getting caught in traffic.
It's so important to be a bit more proactive as opposed to reactive. So yeah, Brisbane's sleepy little town is definitely looking at the things that occurred down in Sydney and Melbourne and trying their best to work their way around it in a smarter fashion.
So education is obviously super important, 1 for higher paying jobs, 2 for the construction jobs, etc. during that project component of the job. So let's talk about the Petrie University in North Brisbane.
So this university is opening up about 20 kilometres to the north of Brisbane, and it's actually an addition to the University of the Sunshine Coast, and it's actually set to house over 10,000 students in the next 10 years and over 6,000 jobs throughout that period, which is going to be a major benefit to the local area.
Yeah, I think it's the biggest greenfield university project in Australia right now, and they're talking about 10,000 students going through that university every year within 10 years time, so they've got big plans to grow it. And as we know from the likes of Newcastle University, Wollongong University, for example, they've had huge impacts on those local economies as well. The fact that this university is also so close to the city and going to be such a major employer in that region gets me super excited, and you can already see some of the suburbs surrounding there are starting to get the benefit from that right now.
Exactly, and the last one that we wanted to talk about is a lot of Chinese investors are coming up and purchasing the shopping centres up around Brisbane and completely renovating and extending them to a whole new level that we've never seen before.
Yeah, so you can see that in the likes of Sunnybank there on the south side of Brisbane. You can already you can see that. I was just reading the other day that a big Chinese firm has just picked up the shopping centre in Arana Hills, the Hills district in Brisbane as well. So it's exciting to see that sort of stuff happening. I was looking at an article in the Financial Review the other day. I think the percentage of Asian investors in Brisbane from this time last year is up 48% right now. It's down by 108% in Sydney, and it's down by 78% from the same time last year in Melbourne. So obviously you can see that money starting to move into a new marketplace now, as well as, you know, more Australians moving up here than any other place in Australia. So there's some of the big projects. Outside of that, almost all of the hospitals are being redone in southeast Queensland at the moment. Some brand new ones have just been constructed or in plans for construction. You've also got a lot of the schools, a lot of the train stations being done up right now. If you look around the city and drive around the city, it feels like you're in one massive construction site right now. It is literally pretty cool. Like, I've been on and off living in Brisbane now for 12 years and I've never seen it look anything like this right now.
Which makes us excited. You know, all of these things are going to be good for the future population that move into the Brisbane market and southeast Queensland.
Yeah, so we hope we've given you some ideas about it up here. It's not just population or income or job growth that's occurring up here right now. It's not the fact that it's been a flat market for 10 years. It's also some bloody big projects that are employing some high profile people and bringing people across the border to fulfill that skill gap as well. I almost choked on those just then. But we really appreciate it, guys. Get your head around Brisbane. I think the next 7 years up here is going to be exceptional for investors that get in at the right time with the right type of product. The cool thing about Brisbane is it's so bloody cheap still. Within 20 k's of the city you can buy $400,000, $450,000 houses on big blocks. Within 10 k's you can still buy beautiful big houses on big blocks for 550 to 600k. You can buy a property walking distance to the beach up here, close to the city, for between 500 and 600,000 bucks. Like, there's still great value here. We certainly haven't gone through any boom since the last GFC. In fact, it's been basically flat for 10 years. So get your head around it. Just because it's a bit unfamiliar doesn't mean that it's not worth looking at. If you've made good money in Sydney or Melbourne, or you've missed the boat down there and you're starting to look for something different. So Simon and I would love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session. Please jump over to our website, www.pumpedonproperty.com. Book in your free strategy session. We can talk a bit more about Brisbane, about your plans for the next couple of years, and see if there's a fit there for you in this market. So thanks for your time and attention, guys, and have a great day.